This is my first video update coming to you from Athens, Greece on this Tuesday morning. What should we discuss here? Let's talk about energy. Let's talk about LNG and oil. So we are getting reports from the Financial Times that U.S. oil companies are in for record profits because of the sanctions and the conflict and the rising price in the energy commodities market. And so U.S. oil majors are raking in the cash. Record prices, according to the Financial Times. We also have reports that the U.S. LNG market is set to boom as they prepare to supply Europe and Europe's gas needs. Now, this is a long-term outlook and a long-term project, but the S&P Global Research Group, S&P Global Platts Research, they are coming out with a study that is saying that U.S. LNG in the future, say the next 5 to 10 years, is going to ramp up enough to provide almost all, perhaps not all, but almost all of Europe's energy needs. In other words, nearly replacing the energy that was provided by Russia. And this is being done with ramping up LNG in existing facilities, LNG processing and production in existing facilities, as well as building new facilities in the United States. Of course, this is a medium to long-term project. And keep in mind that this LNG that is going to be provided by the United States is going to come at a much higher cost to Europe. So basically what's going to happen in the European Union is that eventually, say in the next 10 years, they will sort out their gas needs, and they are going to eventually replace Russian gas. But it's going to come at a cost that could be anywhere between 4 to 10x. It's not going to be the dependable, stable, cheap pipelined Russian gas, which allowed EU industry to flourish and to compete in the world market, in the global market. What you're going to get instead is LNG being shipped via tankers from the United States, coming at a very expensive price, which is going to basically mean that Europe is going to be able to survive but not thrive. European industry is not going to be able to compete. European consumers are going to pay a whole lot more for their energy needs going forward in the next over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Everything's going to be a lot more expensive, but a much poorer Europe at least is going to be a Europe that can kind of heat itself, kind of keep itself warm. I guess that is the message coming out from this research study from S&P Global. And that is where I have always seen Europe heading to. At least that's where I've seen Europe heading to over the last 7 months, which is a European Union that is 100% dependent on the United States, is not able to compete, is completely priced out of the global market. The industry is now going to move to Asia for the most part, but Asia, the Middle East, but perhaps the U.S. as well. But Europe is now deindustrialized, is well on the way towards deindustrialization, and is also well on the way to being 100% beholden and dependent on the United States. And it is going to come at a very, very heavy price, being dependent on the United States. So I thought that was an interesting study that I wanted to get out to everybody. And there was a conference an oil conference taking place in Abu Dhabi with many of the major CEOs of oil companies and energy companies, gas companies as well. And they had some interesting takes as to the energy crisis that the EU is facing and the energy outlook, the oil and gas outlook for the European Union going forward. And many of these CEOs, oil and gas CEOs, they did say that the storage outlook, the gas storage outlook for the EU does appear to be in good shape. However, many of the CEOs said that there is a real risk of a shortfall in 2023 and going forward. So I've been saying this over the past couple of videos that the European Union maybe might possibly eke out the winter. It's going to come at a heavy cost. Once again, a very heavy cost. A lot of suffering in Europe, but they just might be able to eke out the winter with the storage and the supplies that they have. Much of it is due to Russian gas that they stockpiled way in the beginning of the year. And much of the storage, it has to be said, the storage facilities are not meant to be your main source of gas delivery. They're meant to act as a type of balancing stopgap in gas flows. It's part of a much bigger gas supply system that Gazprom set up. That's what the storage facilities are really meant for. But either way, they're going to be used during this winter to be the main source of gas supply for EU member states. And they just may be able, through this patchwork, through this storage supply system, to get through the winter. But many of the oil and gas CEOs are saying that the real problem is in 2023. Because in 2023, the EU is not going to have the Russian gas that they had in the beginning of 2022 to hoard, to stockpile with. That gas is gone. So the real problems, according to many of these CEOs, lie ahead in 2023. That's what I have been saying over the past couple of months and over the past couple of videos. Here are some quotes from some of the CEOs at this Abu Dhabi conference, which took place last week. We've got a difficult winter ahead. And subsequent to that, we've got a more difficult winter in the year ahead of that, because the production that is available to Europe in the first half of 2023 is considerably less than the production we had available to us in the first half of 2022. That is what one oil CEO said. Energy prices have gone off the charts and are close to unaffordability, with many households spending 50% of their disposable income on energy or higher, said the BP CEO, Bernard Looney. That's what he warned, and he agreed with his colleagues that the next winter in Europe could be even more challenging. That's a direct quote. What else here? The issue is not this winter. It will be the next one, because we are not going to have Russian gas, 98% less next year. Maybe nothing, said Eni chief Claudio Descalzi. Given the demand from China, a major importer of gas, and skyrocketing LNG prices, executives of energy companies are worried about possible social unrest. So all of these quotes were taken from this Abu Dhabi conference. It was reported on by RT. And I think it just confirms the fact that what we've been reporting here on the Duran and on this channel, which is that this winter is going to be hard. But it's possible that the EU makes it. They're going to be industrialized, no doubt about it. And as the US LNG market builds in order to take over the gas needs of Europe in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, from 2023 up until the point where the US LNG market can start to supply the gas that the EU needs, once again, always at a much, much higher, less dependable, a much higher price and less dependable delivery. Either way, until that happens, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, you're looking at very, very difficult years for the European Union. years, which I don't know if they can make it. We're not just looking at 2023, which all the CEOs say is going to be hard, but 2024, 2025. Can the EU survive multiple years of hardship? And then can it survive paying 4 to 10 times more for American LNG? That remains to be seen. But I thought that was interesting news coming out of Abu Dhabi. Not many people reported on that conference. RT did. And I wanted to share the quotes from the big oil CEOs, the oil and gas CEOs who run our world. Let's now talk about BRICS. How about we talk about BRICS and what's going on there? Algeria has officially filed to join BRICS. Algeria. Saudi Arabia, they want to join BRICS. Turkey wants to join BRICS. Indonesia wants to join BRICS. Egypt wants to join BRICS. I've heard that Iran is thinking of joining BRICS. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that several countries are knocking on the door of the BRICS. Xi Jinping is going to be meeting with MBS in order to perhaps seal the deal with BRICS. And that would mean that Saudi Arabia is on board with the fair world order and is looking to pivot away from the collective West. And that means the United States of America, and more importantly, that may mean the USD, the petrodollar. Keep in mind that the BRICS, they're looking to build their own payment system for commodities. And can you imagine if they have Saudi Arabia on board with that plan? MBS, look out. Look out, because the United States is not going to let this happen without one hell of a fight. We're talking an existential fight. So MBS better be prepared, because what he is about to do dwarfs anything else that we see happening in the world, in the geopolitical economic world. What MBS might be doing by moving away from the petrodollar. I'm not saying this is a done deal, but it looks like MBS is ready to do this. If he pulls the trigger on this and he meets with Xi Jinping and he says, let's move forward, Saudi Arabia wants to join this fair world order, then look out. This is massive, massive news. And no doubt you are going to get a regime change effort towards Saudi Arabia, the likes of which I think we have not witnessed. And that includes Libya and Syria and even Ukraine, Russia. I mean, we're talking about the petrodollar. It is going to be, I don't even have the words of what awaits Saudi Arabia and MBS if they decide to move in this direction. Big, big things happening in the world, everybody. Big, big things. In Ukraine, we have the delivery of the air defense systems that the West has been touting. The NASAMS, the NASAMS air defense systems, and the ASPID air defense systems, courtesy of, I believe, the United States, Spain, and who else? I want to say the UK or France maybe, but anyway, the Ukraine Defense Minister, Mr. Reznikov, said that Ukraine's air defense systems have now been delivered, and Ukraine's airspace, the skies over Ukraine, he said something like this in a tweet, is now about to become secure. Let me see if I can find his tweet. Here we go. From Reznikov, the defense minister of Ukraine. Look who's here. NASAMS and ASPID air defense systems arrived in Ukraine. These weapons will significantly strengthen the Ukraine army and will make our skies safer. We will continue to shoot down the enemy targets attacking us. Thank you to our partners, Norway, Spain, and the United States. Thank you to our partners, Norway, Spain, and the US. And we are going to see if this air defense system that Ukraine has cobbled together is going to be effective, and to keep away the Russian missiles and the Russian drones, which are systematically on a daily basis tearing apart Ukraine's electric infrastructure and risk plunging Ukraine's economy into complete and total collapse. From what I understand, these systems are not going to make the difference. These aren't going to be the game changers that Reznikov is tweeting about. And to make matters more interesting, I was going to say to make matters worse. Why would it make matters worse? Maybe this is going to make matters worse. But to make things more interesting, who is going to be operating these air defense systems? I imagine it's not going to be Ukraine military. I imagine we're looking at maybe these U.S. weapons inspectors that we heard about last week are probably in country, ready to man these air defense systems. That would be my guess, because I doubt the Ukrainian military has been trained and is ready to man these air defense systems. Maria Zakharova, I'm kind of all over the place with this video because I just have a lot of news topics to knock out in this video. But Maria Zakharova, she sounded off, and I'm not sure when she made this statement, to be quite honest, but she responded to the Czech Republic's proposal to establish a tribunal against Russian leaders for alleged war crimes in Ukraine. This is what the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said on her Telegram channel. And I'm not sure when she posted this, but I thought the quote was pretty brutal, pretty devastating, her response. But, you know, Maria Zakharova, she's quite good. She's quite a master of social media and Telegram. Anyway, she said, quote, "Start with yourselves." This is in response to the Czech Republic's idea to have a war crimes tribunal against Russia. She said, quote, "Start with yourself. Iraq and the remnants of Libya will appreciate the West's active repentance. And so will Serbia. By the way, untouchables, when do you plan to bring yourselves to justice?" That's what Zakharova wrote, calling them the untouchables. Very interesting. Florian Filippo, who was once a very high-up member of Le Pen's National Front, and then he started his own political party in France, he tweeted out that Joe Biden intends to get rid of Zelensky as he no longer needs the puppet. That's what he called Zelensky, the puppet. Interesting tweet from Filippo. I don't know how popular his new party is, but from what I understand, he was pretty high up in the National Front. And of course, we have the U.S. midterm elections coming up, and we are starting to see flyers in the United States. Actually, today. For me, it feels like tomorrow, because I'm going to be waking up on Wednesday morning, and I'll probably have most of the results. But today in the United States, we will have the big midterm elections. And here's a flyer that caught the attention of many Telegram channels. And the brochure flyer says, "Say no to military aid to Ukraine. Leaflets with such an appeal were handed out by Republicans before the congressional elections." And here is their content. "We are Republicans. We only care about our borders. Ukraine will have to account for every dollar that the United States spent on them. Good luck accounting for every dollar that the U.S. spent in Ukraine." Maybe those U.S. weapons inspectors are going to be able to account for every dollar spent in Ukraine. And if you believe that the United States has weapons inspectors in Ukraine to actually inspect the weapons and to audit the weapons deliveries in Ukraine, well, then I've got some Greek graffiti to sell you. Yeah, those weapons inspectors are ready to man those air defense systems that just arrived in Ukraine. I'm sure a lot of inspectors are commanding the force buildup in Kherson, or are about to command the forces that are building up in Kherson in preparation for what may be the big battle in Kherson. Now let's do one final story before I get to my clown world. And this is an important story, actually a pretty big story. It has to deal with Hungary, Poland, and the European Union. So Hungary, they came out with a statement. Peter Szijjártó, he came out with a statement yesterday, and he said that Hungary will not support European Union efforts to jointly raise aid funds for Ukraine amid its ongoing conflict with Russia. He was speaking at a conference in Sofia on Monday, and he said, quote, "We are ready to continue financial support on a bilateral basis, on the basis of bilateral agreement between Ukraine and Hungary. But we will certainly not support any kind of joint EU borrowing in this field." He added that Hungary had been helping its neighbor in various ways for longer than some countries, suddenly acting like Kiev's, and I quote, best friend. Now, let me explain to you what's going on here, the way I see it, as to what's going on with this latest slush fund that is being proposed by Ursula von der Crazy, the pirate of Brussels. Aye, mighty, the pirate of Brussels. Ursula von der Crazy. Anyway, she is proposing, the EU Commission is proposing the creation of a slush fund, and supposedly they have already told Zelensky that he's going to get 18 billion from this EU slush fund. In other words, the EU is going to print some euros. Christine Lagarde's going to print euros. Then they're going to go to the member states and they're going to tell the member states to tax their citizens and get some euros from them. And they're going to create this big slush fund for which the money is going to go to Zelensky and to Ukraine. Instead of the citizens of Europe, they're going to have to freeze. They're not going to have hot water. They're not going to have heating. Doesn't matter. They're going to need to flip the bill for this EU slush fund, which allegedly is going to go to Ukraine and to Zelensky, so that he can keep his economy on. He can keep his economy afloat and keep the war going. Well, Hungary, they're the first EU member state to say, I don't think so. If we want to give stuff to Ukraine, we'll do that on a bilateral basis, because on a bilateral basis, we can account for the money and the weapons and the aid, whatever. We can account for the stuff that we send to Ukraine. We can track the stuff better, and we're more responsible for what we want to give to Ukraine on a bilateral basis. But a slush fund, where we just hand over the keys to the safe, we hand over the keys to the vault to Ursula and her ilk, well, we're not going to do that again. And this is where the story gets interesting. First of all, good on Hungary for saying, no, we are not going to give our money to this slush fund, to see this money then be diverted to Ukraine, which would then be the disappearance of this money. You know, it's just going to go into the pocket of various oligarchs and Zelensky and his clan and perhaps their expensive habits. God knows what else. Anyway, Hungary is not going to play this game, and Hungary learned from the lesson of the that disease that we had a couple of years ago, which I can't mention. Hungary learned this lesson, and Poland, I think, is learning its lesson, because Poland is also under attack, as is Hungary. What happened with this disease that we had for a couple of years is that the EU created a slush fund, and they printed euros, right? They printed trillions of euros. They threw it into the slush fund. Then they went to the EU member states and said, give me some money as well. And they called this fund, what do they call this? I think they called this the Recovery Fund or something like that. They gave it a nice, pretty EU name. The EU is always good at coming out with these pretty little acronyms and names. And they said, okay, give us your money, EU member states. We're going to create this massive 2 trillion, whatever it is, slush fund. And then we're going to give this money back to EU member states because we want to support your businesses, your small to medium-sized businesses, your citizens, and all these people who are going to be coming out of lockdown, and they're going to be suffering economically, right? We already know that they're going to be suffering because we're imposing these lockdowns and we're bankrupting EU member state economies. And so we're going to create this slush fund, and we're going to give this money out to member states when all is said and done, when we emerge from out of lockdown. But as with all things in the European Union, there's a caveat. And the caveat is that if you want this EU recovery money, if the member states want access to this EU recovery money, well, they have to fulfill certain EU values criteria. And lo and behold, Poland and Hungary, well, they just have not checked off something like the 20 EU criteria, EU values that need to be checked off in order to receive their share of the money, which they put into the slush fund. And so the EU is saying, Hungary, because you are an authoritarian, undemocratic, remember, the EU Parliament and the EU Commission said that Hungary is no longer a democracy, it's a dictatorship. Because you are a dictatorship which has had democratic elections to vote Viktor Orban into office 5 times, but you're still a dictatorship. That's what the unelected officials at the EU are saying anyway. Because you're this dictatorship, we're not going to give you access to these funds until you remove Viktor Orban. That's pretty much what they're saying. Until you remove Orban, you're not going to get the money that is rightfully yours. And to Poland, they're saying, well, Poland, we're not going to give you your funds until you hand over the keys of your judicial system to us, the European Union, as well as some other EU values, social things that they would like Poland to enact. You know what I mean when I say that. But yeah, that's what they're telling Poland and Hungary. So Poland and Hungary, or at least Hungary, Poland is not going to do this because Poland is fully on board with the Ukraine project. But I hope that they do this. But Hungary has said, you know what? You got me once, but not again. What did George Bush say? What did George W. Bush once say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you again. Remember when George W. Bush butchered that phrase? Well, you know, Hungary is saying, not this time around. If we want to deal with Ukraine, we'll deal with them on a bilateral basis. Take your EU slush funds and shove them. Good on Hungary. The Hungarian foreign minister, that guy is a rock star. He's a rock star. I need to get him on the Duran. Peter Sayarto, if you're watching this video, please do a live show with us on the Duran. Anyway, that is what Hungary is saying, and they're absolutely right, and they're absolutely justified in telling the EU that they will not participate in these slush funds, because these slush funds are later used as leverage over EU member states in order for those EU member states to sign up to crazy EU initiatives and EU plans and EU social engineering and God knows what else the EU thinks up. But, you know, I bet you a lot of the slush fund money, or I bet you a lot of the money that should be returned from the recovery funds. Here's my thought. I bet you a lot of the money from the recovery fund from the disease, I bet you a lot of that money is already gone. And I bet you a lot of that money already went to Ukraine. And that's one of the reasons that the EU is giving Hungary and Poland such a hard time. Mark my words, I bet you they've already spent a lot, if not all, of those recovery funds on Project Ukraine. And now they're looking to come up with a new slush fund in order to cover for their previous slush fund. And they're also telling Poland and Hungary, look, you're not going to get any of this unless you do all of these 20 things that we give you on a list, unless you check off this these 20 things from this list. You're not going to get the money that you deserve. It's kind of like getting a new credit card to pay off the debt of an existing credit card. I think that the EU is in that type of a hole, and that would explain why the Brussels pirate, the pirate of Brussels, Vander Crazy, is trying desperately to get her hands on the 300 billion. I bet you the European Union has a whole bunch of holes, financial holes that it's created because of their undying support to Project Zelensky. No need to worry, though. I'm sure that the U.S. weapons inspectors, they're on the ground in Ukraine, and they're going to audit everything and figure out where all the money and all the weapons went. No need to worry, everybody. The U.S. Weapons inspectors, they're in Ukraine. They're going to get to the bottom of everything. Anyway, let's do a quick clown world, and we'll wrap this video up. And in this clown world, we are going to go back to Ukraine. And this was an interview with the mayor of Kiev, a former great boxing legend, Vitaly Klitschko, no doubt about that. He is now the mayor of Kiev. Nuland was actually thinking of making him president, prime minister of Kiev, but she said, nah, Vitaly is not ready for it. Yats is our guy. That's what Victoria Nuland said in 2014. Yats is our guy, and they made Yats the temporary prime minister. And then Nuland said, F the EU in that phone call, and 8 years later, voila. Boy, is Nuland and the neocons, boy, are they effing the EU in major ways. Anyway, Klitschko, who is the mayor of Kiev, he was talking about the missile strikes in Kiev, and he had some math problems. He said in this interview that 16 missiles were fired and 16 missiles over Kiev were shot down. But 2 missiles hit substations in Kiev, and they have caused major crippling damage to the infrastructure and blackouts throughout the city. 16 missiles, 16 were shot down, 2 substations were destroyed by 2 missiles. So I'm not sure that adds up. 16 minus 16 is equal to 2, according to Klitschko. Anyway, that's the clown world, everybody. Do I have time for another clown world? Let's do a bonus clown world. One sec. Let's do a bonus clown world. This was sent to me. This video was sent to me and was kindly subtitled in English by one of our community members in Telegram, and it's Olaf Schultz. Let me play the video right now. This is Olaf Schultz. He's telling a joke to, I think, to reporters or to concerned German citizens. I'll put a link to the article down below. It's in German, but I'll put a link to the article down below as well, so you can read it. But Olaf Schultz was trying his hand at comedy when they were asking him about the energy crisis. So let me just play the video and you can see what Olaf Schultz said. And thank you to the Telegram viewer, Telegram community member who added English subtitles to this. And you can see that Olaf Schultz has a terrible sense of humor. A very inappropriate, I won't say terrible, an inappropriate sense of humor. And it shows how out of touch he is with what's going on in Germany. Here's the video.
Neulich kam jemand zu mir und sagte, Herr Scholz, ich habe meinen Elektroofen gerade auf einen Gasofen umgestellt. Und da wusste ich gar nicht, wie traurig ich gucken sollte.
So that was Olaf Schultz trying to be funny. It wasn't funny. People are suffering in Germany, and we are just at the beginning of this. And it just shows that Schultz he's got his head in the clouds. Anyway, that is the video, guys. theduran.locals.com. Go to Alexander's channel. Go to the Duran's channel. We are on all the platforms, including Telegram, and you can find us on Rockfin as well. The link is down below, as well as a pinned comment. So look for us on Rockfin, and go to the Duran shop. One sec. Yes, 10% off. Use the code GOOD DAY. Take care.